Well, hello everyone. It is so good to be with you. Many of you know that we are in the process of moving and setting up our new studio. And so I've kind of coming to you from this. I don't know, it's a bit echoey in here, but I hope that we can get through. I have something amazing for you today. Please share. Please like and share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I believe God is doing something new and fantastic with this show and with where we're going. And I have something to share with you today that I recorded a few months ago. But it was so shocking and staggering to me that I actually couldn't air it. It wasn't ready. But like a fine wine, I think it's ready now. And it's a humdinger. So I'll tell you what we're doing in a moment. Can I start with the word? All right. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. I want to read this to you. You know, we need to understand that all of this talk about, who's got such and such ability and who's a such and such and who's an apostle and a prophet and all of that. Okay. This was all going on, the same thing in the New Testament, okay? Like, we are not in new territory. We're in sort of like the same old story, kind of, festering still. It's that fight. So, 1 Corinthians 3, it says the church and its leaders. And in verse 5, it says, what after all is Apollos? This is Paul asking. And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything. We're all nothing, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. I've underlined and circled God's service. You are God's field, God's building. That is Paul's word to us about all of this. Now I'm starting this new Bible, underlining this for my son so that he can take this on. And do you know, in the move, I found this precious Bible. It is leather bound. I love bonded leather Bibles. It has red letter edition and it's large print PTL. So I'll read the rest of this at the end of the show, but I want to jump into who we are interviewing because there's a lot been said about, well, I'm from such and such, and I study under him, and this is what we do over here. And I think maybe we've gotten all off track on who we follow if it is not Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. That is all that matters. There have been men that have come along, many of them starting well, they say, and not ending so well. And I don't want to be one of them. I want to finish well. If we don't finish well, if the latter house is not greater than the former, we have wasted our lives. I would rather have tremendous difficulty and learning steps and all of that in the beginning of your life's ministry. And we all have a ministry. We all should be reaching out, doing God's purpose and will in our lives. God is great. He's powerful. He's mighty. Let's not lose our understanding of how powerful the message of Jesus Christ in, even as we try to discern some of the message bearers that have disappointed us. Today, we're going to be talking about William Branham. I did not know when I did this interview next, and it's with a great man, and his name is John Collins. I did not know that William Branham had been a part of my past, that he came to our church, Glad Tidings, that there was seeds of his beliefs and doctrinal positions that I was raised in. And when I spoke with John Collins, as we had this discussion, it became clear he was telling me things that I didn't know. And I was grappling. And I couldn't air this. I wrestled with it for so long. So I'm clearer now. And we're going to just go there. And he's going to tell his story. John Collins is the author and webmaster of William Branham Historical Research. He was born and raised in the Message cult following of William Branham, and is the grandson of Willard Collins, former pastor of William Branham's Branham Tabernacle in Jeffersonville, Indiana. From 1976 to 2012, John was unduly influenced to believe the practice many of the religious and cultural views expressed by William Branham and by men and women who were in Branham's inner circle. After his escape in 2012, and this is the author, John Collins, escaping from this thinking and this life, John began the process of deprogramming from the indoctrinated religious and worldviews Branham expressed on recorded sermons from 1947 to 1965. This process included re-evaluating every aspect of life, including personal experiences and beliefs that were core to his belief system, his worldview, and personality. In the early stages of this re-evaluation, John's worldview was centered around indoctrinated apocalyptic theology that resulted from William Branham's focus on doomsday through either doomsday predictions or alleged doomsday prophecies. And so I am going to say that there's parts of this interview that I don't necessarily remember, but I remember being taken back, and I felt like the Holy Spirit was trying to show me something about my background and about it all coming together and where we're going. And I kind of just couldn't think about it. And then recently I remembered this interview and I'm like, JT, remember that guy? He was saying all that stuff. And I was, and that's because suddenly now there's an awakening to, well, what we've been watching in the Christian movement. And if it's real, if things like the Kundalini spirit, and I want to talk about that later this week. The Kundalini spirit, this is a spirit thing that happens in Hinduism, and it looks just like some Christianity. It's so mind-boggling, everyone. What's happening? I hope that Christians can just be real and normal. That we can just, Jesus was not a crazy person. He said radical things, but he was empowered and ultimately empowered to live and die so that we could have the truth. And the truth should not be altered by man. And I have a feeling that we've been walking out some things in our world because of some different men, and William Branham is today, but there's others. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked at Jim Jones coming from the Latter-Rain movement. I'm shocked by a whole bunch of stuff. And I just hope you'll go on this journey with me. And I want to thank you for writing letters that have been meaningful. You're thanking me for covering this topic, and you're praying for me because you know that it's costly, and you can see that I am perplexed at times, but I'm honest. And I think we have to talk about this so that we do not lose another generation to anything that is not of God. If it is not of God, if it is not in here, if it is not easy to understand in here, I'm not certain that I want to listen to people expounding their viewpoint on what they think God intended. I just want Jesus. I just want this word. And this word is quick and powerful, and it's sharp, and it divides truth from deception. I hope you enjoy this interview. You just explained to me that William Branham spoke, to your understanding and knowledge, spoke at my church, Glad Tidings, where I grew up. So, wow. Interesting times. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for having me on. But second, you brought back so many memories of the cult that I escaped in just what you said. That phrase the passage that you read, Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. I actually cover that in my latest book. It was widely used as loaded language for the Ku Klux Klan, that phrase, and they had it on banners. And William Branham he was working with leaders in the Klan. So they were repurposing this phrase and turning it upside down. And just like you said, we could not chew gum. I'll never forget the first time I went bowling. It was the greatest experience ever. We were not allowed to. There were demons plaguing the halls, man. But that's the way we grew up.
Oh my goodness. So the same sort of rules. Literally,
oh, yeah.
Like I'm having a life experience here right now talking to you that this was sort of like a regular thing. I mean, oh my goodness, it was something I've joked so often about, truly finding out what was horribly going on in bowling alleys. They were bowling. So tell me, give me more about what you know about all of this. You decided, I guess, after kind of breaking free, and I'd like to hear about that, but you decided to really catalog it, put it in a book to understand the kind of spiritual abuse that has actually gone on.
Absolutely. So my journey is a long, extensive journey, much longer than we have today. But I was in the cult for 37 years. My grandfather was, as you said, the head pastor of the movement. And we were told that it was this little, small, isolated, very, very few people in this. But all of the other Christians weren't going to make it into the rapture. We were the elite, right? I did not discover until, I want to say it was like 3 months before leaving, that something just was off. And I began looking at it, asking questions, and I went through a long 10-year journey of researching what it was that I was in, which actually was in the first book that I have on the website, which is Preacher Behind the White Hoods.
Wow.
So it talks about the Klan and all of this. In that process, I came to realize that this is much bigger than we were told. There are I think the cult advertised up to 3 million people in it. But I did not yet at that time realize how much Branham's influenced all of Christianity in America. So I began to examine figures, and I came across some people who were in the IHOP KC cult, and they mentioned Paul Cain, and Paul Cain was Branham's protege. And in fact, I've spoken to Cain a few times on the phone. So I began researching, well, how are they linked? And I came to realize that it's just so much bigger. Branham had such influence on what was Pentecostalism, what was transitioning into the charismatic movement, and beyond. So this latest book maps it all the way out from before Pentecostalism all the way up to the New Apostolic Reformation.
That is absolutely fascinating. And those are really thick books. Like, that's a lot that you have covered in those books. So you began to realize only 2 to 3 months after coming, 2 to 3 months before coming out of this, you began, what triggered you on this?
I went through a series of very difficult, life-changing experiences, health issues and job issues, etc. And it shook me. And this happened I remember vividly, it was the Labor Day meetings of 2011. At that point, I would have died for the cult. I had no reason to question, no reason to question at all. And yet I was shaken. I just, something was off. I was on I was on a journey to try to find out more about who I was and why. So from Labor Day until January 1st, 2012, I was just asking questions. But I learned very quickly that when you're in a cult, you don't ask questions. They do not like it when you do. So I could tell something was really wrong. When we left on late December, my wife and I decided we're going to wait till January. We'll go have Christmas with the family because unfortunately they're probably going to shun us. That was one of the things that cults do. But after that, I could not even call it a cult. I did not realize that it was a cult. It wasn't until I started researching and digging and finding out that there's a lot of history that they've covered up and altered. And that's the reason why these books are so thick, because Branham has been venerated as one of quote unquote God's generals. And so much of the history that exists is not quite accurate. So in the books, I have footnotes with where I got the information, the exact quote, whether it's a government document or a book, or even interviews that I had with different people. So I'm having to rewrite history to make it more accurate.
Wow. Did the name Branham, was it always a part of the group that you were in? Because I don't recall that name while I was growing up.
Branham was the leader of the post-World War II healing revival, and he was one of two catalysts for the latter rain movement, William Branham and Franklin Hall. So these two guys basically started what eventually evolved into the charismatic movement. Branham's name, he was the central figure of our cult, so his name was mentioned not only in every single service, but also every family dinner, every family gathering, everywhere we went, we said Branham this, Branham that, right? So he was a significant figure. And I also talk about this in the book a bit. Around 1957, when Jim Jones of People's Temple was working with Branham, there was a massive split in the movement. And after the split, you had people who were pro-latter rain, people who weren't, people who were evolving their own ministries into what became super apostles and new cults. Many of those cults distanced themselves from Branham. And I cover that a good bit in the book. But what happened is a lot of these movements have no idea that they use Branham as a stepping stone for their ministries.
So, and you're talking about IHOP and I think you said Paul Cain. So the IHOP movement, or the IHOP organization, International House of Prayer, is this? Are you saying that the roots are from Branham?
Absolutely. In fact, I cover that in the book too. But in fact, whenever it began, they claimed that Branham claimed that he had this angel that was part of his stage act. This angel would come and perform the healing of the sick. Well, when Paul Cain helped the Kansas City Fellowship build this thing that became IHOP KC, they claimed that it was Branham's angel that came down and commissioned it. And they started preaching the Joel's Army, Manifest Sons of God doctrine, which came straight from Branhamism. So these guys were basically reinventing the movement as Branhamism 2.0.
So what was the beliefs of this Branham, as you have discovered?
Branham taught that he was the church age messenger. He taught dispensationalism. So in each dispensation of time, Branham taught that there was a messenger that was sent to the church as the super apostle, basically setting up the stage for what became the fivefold ministry hierarchy of authoritarian control. At the top of each hierarchy was this church age messenger, which his cult believed him to be. And this was largely based on British Israelism and Christian identity. They repurposed the last chapter of Malachi 4 to claim that the Elijah that's mentioned in Malachi 4 was not John the Baptist, but instead this figure that's coming at the end of the world. So in the Branham movement and many of the movements that spun off, the end time messenger is this Elijah figure from Malachi 4.
So they're still waiting for him.
Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. And so was it all bad? Like, was there sexual misconduct involved in all of this, and some of the spiritual abuse that we're seeing going on rampantly in our world? Was that part of his movement as well?
Absolutely. In fact, recently there was a series of investigative reports that came out of, I think it's Tucson Daily Star, Tucson.com. They investigated even the key figures who were in Branham's campaign team, set up communes where they were abusing children. The things that they did to people in this cult is so bad that if you're putting this on YouTube, I actually can't say it. It's that bad. It's tied to Colonia Dignidad, which was a torture compound in Chile. It's also tied to, in the recent events in the Shakahola forest in Kenya, there was a church leader who trained his victims to believe that they should starve themselves to make it into heaven. Somewhere around 450 people died in that event. The investigators went into the compound and they found several of Branham's books there. So I cover some of that in the book as well. Many different cults, most of them destructive in one way or another, spun off of this movement.
Wow. So were you literally born and raised right into it? Your parents had already been a part of this movement?
I was born and raised in it. My grandfather, as I said, was the head pastor. So this is all I knew. This was the life that I had. And like I said, I had no reason to question it. I was shaken and began to do a journey of self-enlightenment.
So did Branham seem to be supportive? Like, did they out these terrible sexual things that were going on and with kids or other things? Was he outing it, or was this part of what was acceptable, or was it just a big secret?
It was a big secret. As the children were being abused in one of the compounds in Prescott, Arizona, Branham actually went to the compound and praised the leaders who were abusing their victims for creating what he called Little Goshen, which was, as you know, biblically, it's not intended to say that it's a bad thing that these guys are doing this. Branham supported many ministries like this. So as these guys were abusing the people, the leadership swept it under the rug. What's really bad is that secret nature continued. There were people who were aware that this was still going on. It went on until the late 70s, if I remember correctly. So all of the leadership after Branham died kept this a secret, and many of them knew.
So the cover-up phenomenon that we are actually seeing in ministry after ministry after ministry being exposed right now, it's an interesting thing that's happening. But is everyone under this Branham thing, or has the sad effects of Branham's ministry and his legacy filtered into all kinds of places, or is the cover-up just kind of really a part of the church, wrong things that they're doing? Like, it's often that this can happen because man is sinful and man tends to cover up their sins.
From what I can tell, it's learned behavior more than any type of strategy. Okay. See, the problem is the biblical model for church leadership was flipped upside down in this movement. The pastors, the prophets, the apostles, they became authoritarian figures, and they suppressed all critical thinking. So you're not able to question them if something if there is a problem that's exposed, you're not allowed to think about it. And what happens over time is this leadership found that this is a good way to, you know, keep things going whenever there is a serious issue in the church, such as the sexual abuse. At the same time you had all of that going on, this was a very theatrical style of ministry. Many stage acts were created because of this. And the stage acts, while some of it was true and some of it was based on Christianity, large portions were complete fiction. And they kept that a secret as well. So when you have a ministry that is supporting a secretive type of arrangement and suppressing critical thinking, you have the recipe for disaster.
That's a really pivotal point that you just mentioned about critical thinking. I know when I was growing up, if we asked a question where we thought something was unfair, I went to the private school that, was part of the church. And, we would get called rebellious for asking questions. And so I have had to really, because I have a very, a questioning sort of personality. And so I've had to just allow myself to really be that person that questions an awful lot of things, because it wasn't necessarily second nature to me.
Yeah. I have the same type of personality. I always ask questions. I want to know how things work, right? It's part of life for me, but you're right. In these movements, you cannot ask questions, but worse than that, they train the people to believe that the question itself comes from Satan. So if you have a question, even internally, they suppress the thinking inside where you can't further that question. And many people like you and I who have inquisitive minds, suppressing that is like blocking their entire personality. So escaping this, the freedom to think, is one of the greatest freedoms of all.
So as you've grown up and left and been able to look back and then, go in depth as to what took place, was there bad things that were happening in and around your particular church or, the ministry there? Was there sexual cover-up that you've ever been able to see, or was your place spared of that?
So my family attended churches from coast to coast in the Branham cult. We went to several different churches. I went to like 13 different schools growing up. So we went to several of them. Some of them were very destructive. Some of them did have abuse in them. Others were somewhat benign. We had some churches where the leadership actually, the people could not even buy a vehicle before going to the church and asking, can I buy the vehicle? There was that level of control in some of the churches, while others you'd look at it and you'd say it was just a Pentecostal church, just a normal church. What I will say is after this, after I realized what this was and how bad it was, we started setting up support groups for people who were escaping. And the abuse that the victims who have escaped have talked about is horrific and very widespread from all countries. We've set up sort of an underground network of support, underground railroad network of support, where people who have escaped can help other people. And one of the problems we're finding is that because so many movements were built off of Branhamism, we're finding that many different cults that we would not have identified ourselves with are now also coming into the support group because they too were something that spun off of Branhamism. IHOP KC is one of the latest. In our podcast every Monday, I've been talking to Jed Hartley, who is the son of Bob Hartley from the Kansas City Fellowship. He's been going through the same thing with the victims of IHOP KC, as you know, a lot of abuse out of there. All of these groups coming together have one thing in common. The sins that you're talking about, the sexual crime, etc., all covered up. The victims were trained not to critically think and not to ask questions should something like this arise, while there was an authoritarian figure who was demanding basically all of their worship to channel through him as a mediator between God and man.
Wow. I'm wondering if you've ever looked into the background of Marcus Lamb and Joni Lamb specifically. I haven't seen any. I know that there is. I have an article here somewhere that just gives the whole, detail of the background of how they began in ministry, and it seemed as if they had very lofty ideals and that they wanted to sincerely follow the ways of the Lord. But as it grew and as things progressed, there was more power and more money. There was the cover up that was happening, and it just became like it was the way that difficult things were handled, cover up, so that there's no harm that would be seen to come to the organization. So this sounds kind of cultish in a way.
Yeah, I've briefly studied Morning Star and its creation. In fact, I want to say it was last week, I released the first of the series of videos that I'll be putting out on it. While I can't say their intentions was good or bad, I don't know at this point. What I can say is the outcome matches the pattern that I've seen. You have the cover up, you have the scandals, you have the crimes. I can't say that the crimes are limited to Branhamism. You've got problems in any church, but the pattern of covering up the problem for the sake of continuing the ministry matches the pattern. So this I see as a huge problem.
Yes. So it's all kind of part of the problem that we are seeing, very widespread right now. We're having scandal after scandal. And people get exposed right now, John. And what is shocking to me is that they're not removed. The church is not exactly operating in a manner that can be trusted for the removal of perverts from the top of that organization.
One of the people studied on my website is Todd Bentley. Todd Bentley was also another person who is promoting William Branham's Manifested Sons of God, Joel's Army doctrines. So he has a connection, and we're actually going to go a little bit deeper with that connection in our podcast this season. But as you know, with him, there were problems, and he's being restored to ministry even recently at Morning Star.
I saw that. He just recently did a big, I've done a video. I don't know if it'll come out before this one. Yes, I just want to resonate with you that it feels so wrong. And then I read about his past on Julie Roy's article. Like there's pedophilia, like something's very wrong. So what do you think about that? What is going on?
It's pretty bad. The history. So he is another person who claimed Branham's angel, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go look it up. The problem, as I mentioned before, is that this type of ministry creates this super apostles like Paul talked about in the letters, right? The people have elevated the men and women in this movement to a status far beyond what they should have been, while suppressing critical thinking. So whenever somebody like this has an issue and steps away, they can bring the predators back into the picture because they have trained the people not to critically think about the scriptures that apply to the person being restored. And they reference passages from the Bible that are talking about restoring of people to the fold. But what they're leaving out is the fact that it's not intended to be restoring people into positions of leadership. It's a good thing that a person who is a sinner gets restored to Christianity. That's a good thing. But putting them in leadership is not it doesn't match the biblical role.
And so you have a podcast that you've been mentioning. Could you let us know what that podcast is so that people can follow you?
It's the William Branham Historical Research Podcast, which is on Apple and Spotify. On YouTube, the YouTube channel is Leaving the Message. So I've got collections of research videos. Much of what we're talking about today, I have in a research video of some form or another. And we have a series of podcasts that come out on the Leaving the Message YouTube channel.
Okay. And so do you get a lot of backlash against you for speaking this way?
Absolutely. It's, in fact, if I were to open up my email today, you'd see all this hate mail that I get constantly. The cults do not like the information about their history to be published. They like it to be whitewashed. And so whenever somebody is publishing their accurate history, they try to block it. So we've actually, the reason why the YouTube channel doesn't match the name, we've actually had YouTube channels taken off by the
investigative reporters as they began to research the.
Sorry, was that me? Oh, okay. Sorry, I added a share. I just want to, if I can put this in, is that what's making the noise? Is this, I just want to confirm this is the YouTube channel that people can follow you on? Okay.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so, yes, please continue. They don't like you exposing this.
Yeah, or the people that I have a guest every Friday who has escaped at one cult or another. They do not like the victim speaking out, as you're well aware. Mm-hmm. So what we have tried to do, we're very careful about how we expose the cults. Try not to mention any names, keep the names out of it. But instead, we focus on the healing for the victims, and the information that has been covered up, we publish that.
Okay. So are some people that are mad at you, they're people that have been a part of IHOP, let's say, or Silent Invasion of the New Apostolic Reformation? You're going to have this fellow on. And so people that are actually supportive of these movements, they're the ones that are speaking out against you.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you stay strong in light of that? Like, what should we be looking at the church? I believe we're going through a reformation. I don't know what you think. There's a whole ton of us. We're just not going to be stupid, and we're not going to be silent in the face of the church, which we believe in. We believe that the Lord instituted, forsake not the gathering together with the saints. But does that mean a home group? I don't know, maybe more so than bringing all your tithes into the storehouse to make the storehouse so huge that you can have, $100,000 honeymoon, or you can have the biggest cars and homes. Like, that isn't exactly what I think Jesus had in mind. Yeah.
The biggest problem that has been expressed by the people who have escaped is that the cult churches that they have escaped had lost the focus of the people. The people are the ones that should be lifted up. And people who are going to church need help. Christ did not come to save the sinners, is one of the themes that I hear from the people who are escaping. But the churches try to cover up the sin from the victims and even from the leadership, to the extent that the victims themselves get further victimized. And the problem is they've lost the focus. The people is the focus. The people is the church. And if you can understand that whenever you're in one of these groups and you see leaders who aren't focused on helping the people, it's not a healthy church.
It's very confusing to me that it should be so difficult to understand that if people have abused spiritually, and that's in lording over them, demanding certain things that are not scriptural, or there's been sexual sin repeatedly, and I think I have grace in my heart for somebody having a bait and a trap set for their soul, and they need to deal with it before the Lord. But it's so different than a serial offender, and so different than covering up things that should be exposed in order to protect the large organization at the expense of people. And it just seems that it's a very small, tiny percentage of people that will actually do these kind of things because they have access to the money, they have access to the power. And once upon a time, they had the megaphone. and no one else could speak. So if you were coming against them, they would just destroy you. And I've seen that happen in the past.
Oh, yeah. And the thing of it is, in Christianity, there is reconciliation for the sinner. So if there's a person who has a problem like this, the reason why the religion exists is to help the people and help them get closer to Christ. But the problem is they are taking the people who have these issues, putting them in leadership positions, and the people who have this problem are going to commit the crimes again. So there needs to be a separation of the leadership from the people who have this type of issue. They should not be put back into the leadership positions.
Do you think that folks like yourself that are sounding the alarm, you're doing podcasts, you're bringing knowledge to people, you're bringing strength, and also you're exposing? Do you think this is the Reformation I'm talking about? Once upon a time, you had to discover for yourself and try to figure it out, and you had to put, and write the book because nobody had told you. You had to figure it all out. But now, even more, you can do a podcast, you can reach thousands and thousands of people, and you can bring help to thousands. This is the new thing that I don't think this can be stopped.
Yeah. And more people need to step up. And whenever people are in this type of religion, especially abuse victims, they want to be silent because it's very uncomfortable. But the more voices that speak out against this type of movement, the movement itself can't exist without the people. So if you have a cult type environment and all of your victims are stepping up and saying, no, we don't want this anymore. we want true Christianity. Eventually the leadership would have to change. See, I'm in one of the unique positions because my family was at the top. I still hold many people in high regards who are in the top of the cult. They're good friends of mine and they're good people. But the problem is they're in a system that enables predators to exist. We need to step away from that type of system.
I'm really glad to hear you say that because we do love the people that are deceived and that maybe are not fully cognizant of what has transpired, what is going on. We love them. So even leaders that, that are making mistakes, we love the people that are maybe operating in what they would call grace to those who are, not worthy of being put in positions in the church, but they're showing grace and all of these. So love has to rule, and yet we do need the truth to be exposed. We need more of the truth so that we understand what's happening.
Absolutely. And that's why I do what I do. The more information that is available to the people, the more they understand what it is that they're in. And having the information is power. I've seen victims who step away from these types of movements who get further re-victimized because they have not had access to the information. And they think that this type of movement is a good thing rather than a bad thing. But by having the information available, it's power to the victim. And once they have that power, I've seen many of the people who are on the podcast with me who host from various series that we do. Many of them were not in a position to do that before they had access to the information. So having the awareness, having the ability to determine what is right and what is wrong in these movements, I think is helpful.
So coming from your background, what have you found out about pure religion? What should it look like? What should church look like today? What is a healthy church?
There are several of the websites you can type in what is a healthy church, and you can get some good examples. But for me, my journey was a bit different. When I came out of this movement, as I mentioned, I was going through some severe trauma. And I have a cousin who called me every day to make sure that I stayed alive. And honestly, if not for him, I may not have. But he was not a believer in William Branham, which in that type of religion, you think they're going to hell because they don't believe the central figure. And so I asked him, Marcus, why don't you believe in the prophet? And he said, John, I believe the cowboy religion. And I said, what's that, Marcus? And he said, love God, love your neighbor who's not trying to kill you, and be kind to animals. And at that point in my life, I thought, that's wrong. He didn't mention the prophet, so he's probably going to hell. After I left this, we started attending many different churches, and some of the churches were good. Some were not great experiences. But one thing I came to learn is that what he said actually had more truth in it than most of the cult doctrine that I had. Obviously he forgot to mention the word Jesus in that, but loving God, loving your neighbor, I think that's what it's all about. And the problem with these movements is they have progressed to the level where your focus isn't that. Your focus isn't loving God and loving one another. It's more about the leadership and who is your super apostle.
My final question to you, and I'm just going to urge everyone to read your books, follow your podcast, and learn from the intense research that you've put in. But there's this term, touch not God's anointed. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, about what that means to you and scripturally.
For me, it means Branhamism 101. That was one of the things that not just Branham, but many of these predators used. That's their way of saying, don't question me, don't critically think. Touch not God's anointing means you cannot examine who is claiming to be anointed. The problem is, what if they're not anointed? The Bible talks about prophets, and it gives examples on how to test a prophet. For example, many of these people claim to be prophets, yet when their prophecies fail, the people are told that by this touch not God's anointed example, you can't examine their prophecies. Well, how are you going to tell if it's a true prophet or a false prophet? So my advice is, if somebody's saying this, there probably is a problem, or they wouldn't be using that phrase.
So very interesting. Absolutely fascinating. I've really enjoyed this. I think that probably because you've written all these books and they're so thick that we could probably talk for hours and have another discussion on this in time to come. And I would really appreciate that. We can cover other aspects. I'd like to say at the end of all of this, I left that church that I grew up in, and I survived, and I don't feel like I was in a cult, as in, I don't know what to call it. It makes me feel so sad. You know what I mean? To call it that, but there were aspects, and there was terrible cover up, and there was terrible sin.
Yeah.
And the human condition, I guess, lends itself to that.
Yeah, I just finished. The reason my voice is so hoarse, I just finished recording a podcast with Bob Scott, who was Mike Bickle's brother-in-law. He and I do a podcast, I think it's every other Monday, but we're covering that exact subject. There was a lot of bad things. It was a toxic religion, but what are the good things that come from it? Because it's not just the good that molds our character. It's both the good and the bad. And having gone through these experiences in some ways makes us a little bit stronger.
It really does. And my deep, heartfelt love for Jesus came because Sunday night, the service was over. We went into prayer for another hour and a half. Like, I did fall asleep underneath the church things while my parents were praying, but they were actually very sincere. They were crying out to the Lord. They loved the Lord. To the day that my mom and dad passed, they really absolutely loved the Lord. And I think I would also say that there was an awakening in us as we all kind of realized, you know what? It's really not about all these rules. And so we began breaking rules as a family, which was really cool. like, actually go to a movie together. Like, my mom was convinced that if the Lord showed up, when she's in a movie theater, she's not going to heaven.
Same
right?
thing. That we could probably talk hours on just the similarities with what you were in. And
Yeah. And then, I mean, now the movies, I think they're so corrupt. I don't like to see most of them, but a really good movie, I think I'm still serving God if I go to see, a movie and now they're doing Christian movies. So I wonder what my mom
Yeah.
would have to say about that. But I think she went to see In Search of Noah's Ark and the whole church went. Oh, did we have fun with that? What? We're all going to a movie theater. So anyways, I had fun. And when I got older, my mom, I would call her because they always had the paper, and I would ask her what's playing in the movies. And she didn't like it, but she would look it up. And then she would kind of have a giggle and she said, "Oh, you brat, you brat." And so I think that we were all like realizing that God is love. And it's not about all of these rules. It's so silly, what we've made it. And I love the way that you put that. It's just about loving people. And I just
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, and also for your podcast, your books, what you're doing. It's amazing. I think we're having a season where God is flipping the tables on religion and how we've been deceived by those that did not have God's heart in it. One final question. Branham, did he love God? Was he just faking, or was he deceived?
I've come to the conclusion that he was an atheist. And
Wow.
that's an opinion, right? We can't go ask him because he's dead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But see, here's the thing. I have many friends who are Pentecostals. In fact, one of the guys who helps me with research is a Pentecostal minister. There are oneness Pentecostals who truly believe that the only way that a person is correctly baptized is in the name of Jesus Christ. And then there's the Trinitarians. For them, this is their core ideology. You have to believe it or you don't, right? You can't frame God into the modalistic version or the Trinitarian version and then intermix it. Yet I have on record in the transcripts of the sermons identified places where Branham is going to one church and preaching Trinitarianism, and going to another and preaching that anybody who preaches Trinitarian has taken the mark of the beast. So you can't have both. Mm-hmm. I've also talked to some of the ministers who were involved in the early ministry, and they said there was a big uprising because Branham would actually go perform the baptisms, oneness and then Trinitarian, and then vice versa. You can't do that with no convictions. So I truly don't believe that he had any convictions, or he would never have done this.
Wow. Just amazing. So insightful. So interesting. Thank you very much, John. Be well. And I hope that people will follow your podcast. And I hope that we can have another conversation, because I think that everything's changing now. And
absolutely.
And God's happy about that.
Absolutely.
God's happy.
I would love to talk more about your church too. I'm curious. I want to dig in deeper.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll give you a call offline, and
that sounds good.
Yeah. Because I'd love to know more from you as well. This is very, it's an awakening for me. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, wow and wow. So I just want to apologize to Mr. John Collins that I have not aired your interview until now. And I want to thank you for your honesty and your journey and the Spirit of God that I felt while speaking with you, and your understanding of things that I did not understand. And I appreciate you bringing that to the world, and I appreciate your journey. May we all find what is right and true. And when we realize that all of this NAR, much of it founded on the doctrinal positions of William Branham, it just gives us pause to consider and to think through it. And I have some verses to read here at the end. Thank you very much. My website is Laura-Lynn.tv. And I appreciate that you support us and you help us. We are not supported by any large ministry. JT and I work like dogs. And, I'm really excited because part of our team, so Toby Carson, I've talked about her many times, and she's our senior producer, and she's coming home from Costa Rica to spend a little bit of time with us. And we also have another person, and I don't know if I've asked her if I can say her whole name, but it starts with M and her last name starts with M. She's special. She's also going to be coming to stay with us for a season. We're going to do like, how, I don't know, Apple computers or whatever, they all like ended up being together, or was it Facebook? I don't know, where everybody just, gets in the same room and you think. And maybe those are bad examples. Really, I just want to be like the apostles, and I want to live and work and breathe together and figure out what God has. So at this time, we've got like accommodations that can fit everyone. We've all got our privacy, and JT's a very private person, so you probably need to pray for him at this time about what that's going to look like living with all the, sorry, banging the microphone there, but living with all the girls. He is not excited about this, but girls, it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be just fine. So I appreciate that many of you understand we're doing something unique. I don't know another ministry like ours. I don't know another place that's speaking about these things in such a bold fashion. The podcasters are doing this. The podcasters are willing to tell the truth. So I'm a podcaster. We love it. My husband worked behind the scenes for a lot of years, and I worked in front of the camera professionally for a lot of years. And so we combined everything, and now we just rely on the Lord to give us direction about what he wants to speak to the nations about. And we have so many of you from all these different places. So, man, heavy. That's how I feel, that it's heavy. And before I get to the scripture, if you need some ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or fenbendazole, just give Mia at sozohealth@proton.me. Right, JT? Mia at sozohealth@proton.me. We're just operating at a different way than we usually do, so we have to make it all work. And silver, hey, listen, silver and gold, if you want to invest in some of that, we recommend Steve at Sun City Silver, and that is sovereignize at protonmail.com. Is that right, JT? Do you think? Okay, he'll put it up. All right. I am just so blessed. God is helping us to understand and to get through this season. So as we close, I just want to read to you again from 1 Corinthians 3. So at the start of the show, I read to you about Paul saying, after all, what is Apollos? What is Paul? We're only servants. It doesn't matter who waters, and wouldn't it be good if everybody in ministry just had that sort of way? It's not like I'm so-and-so and I need to be respected, but rather that we would just be like serving God in spirit and in truth, not having the multi-level marketing system church, not getting wealthy, filthy, rich off the donations and the lucre, that is being sold, but rather that we are just committed to Jesus. Amen. So in verse 10 of 1 Corinthians 3, it says, by the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. We don't just build all willy-nilly. We don't just choose this and that and use products and things that are not of God. We build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold or silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. And I really think that that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing fire in the kingdom of God. We're seeing that everything that can be burned is being burned. Everything that can't stand the test of the purity, the purifying of what our lives have brought forth, the character that we have. When God is disciplining, he means business. And the fire of God's discipline, it burns up everything that cannot withstand the purity test. So it says here, the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is sacred, and you together are that temple. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And this temple, God asks us to be holy and to be righteous. May we walk in purity with him. God bless everyone. Thanks for joining me today.
You know, it's not easy to deliver the truth of what our sick world is doing, but for some of us, we feel that we have no choice. Because if we are silent about these abominable things, then we are letting evil go unchecked, and we cannot do that. For those of you wonderful people who are writing me and are sharing your encouragement, I am deeply grateful. Thank you for all the letters that you've been sending. Thank you for the donations and the support. I found out that in order to speak the truth, you have to become very, very strong. If you would go to my website at www.laura-lynn.tv, you'll find all of the ways that you can contact me. Remember, my friends, all is well. All is well. Thanks for joining me.